People describe it in vague language. I don't feel like myself. I feel numb. It's like I'm watching my life instead of living it. They assume something is wrong with their personality, that they've lost passion, that adulthood drained them, that stress made them dull. Psychology is less sentimental about it. Disconnection from yourself is rarely a mystery. It is usually an adaptation. You are not born disconnected. No infant arrives detached from their own sensations. Babies feel everything. Hunger, fear, comfort, curiosity. They register it instantly and respond without shame. The original nervous system is wired for expression. It expects a response from the environment. It expects someone to notice. Disconnection begins when that expectation is repeatedly unmet. Attachment research has described this for decades. When a caregiver responds consistently, the child's internal world organizes itself around a simple belief: what I feel matters, and someone will help me regulate it. But when responses are inconsistent, sometimes attentive, sometimes absent, sometimes overwhelmed, the child faces a different calculation. If expressing emotion does not reliably bring safety, the nervous system does not keep expressing it. It adapts. This is not dramatic. It does not feel like a rupture in the moment. It feels like subtle adjustments. You cry less loudly. You stop asking twice. You become easier. The brain, still forming, begins to prioritize predictability over authenticity. If being expressive creates friction, suppression becomes efficient. Researchers who study emotion regulation have shown that suppression is not inherently unhealthy. In unstable environments, it works. It reduces conflict. It minimizes exposure. It protects attachment bonds that feel fragile. But it also requires something significant: distancing from internal experience. You learn to override your own signals. That is where the first fracture happens, not between you and others, but between you and yourself. For some, this adaptation deepens through early responsibility. Parentification, where a child becomes the emotional stabilizer in the household, is rarely labeled as such at the time. It is framed as maturity. You're strong. You're the responsible one. You don't cause trouble. But beneath that praise is a quiet reorganization of priorities. Your feelings become secondary. If a parent is overwhelmed, depressed, volatile, or dependent, the child often learns to manage the emotional temperature of the room. This has been described in family systems work for generations. The child scans, adjusts, anticipates. Their own distress becomes inconvenient. There isn't space for it. So the brain makes space by pushing it down. You don't stop feeling. It stops accessing. Over time, the nervous system begins to associate internal signals with potential threat. Anger might destabilize someone. Sadness might burden someone. Joy might draw unwanted attention. So the safest option becomes neutrality, flatness, containment. You become disconnected not because you are cold, but because you are adaptive. Chronic stress compounds this. When childhood involves ongoing unpredictability, emotional volatility, subtle neglect, constant tension, the body does not remain in a relaxed baseline. It lives in readiness. Trauma research has shown how the nervous system, exposed to repeated stress, calibrates toward hypervigilance. The body anticipates disruption, even in calm moments. Hypervigilance requires energy. To sustain that level of alertness, the system deprioritizes what it deems non-essential: reflection, play, emotional nuance. These are expansive processes. Survival is cheaper when simplified. Feel less, monitor more. This is how disconnection becomes embodied. It doesn't announce itself. It feels like competence. You handle things. You stay composed. You don't overreact. You might even pride yourself on being rational. But beneath that stability is a quiet, narrowing, emotional range compresses. Intuition dulls. Sensations become background noise. You stop checking in with yourself because there was never a safe place to land. Shame often seals this pattern. When a child repeatedly experiences their needs as excessive or inconvenient, they internalize a belief: my internal world is too much. Researchers who study shame have described how this belief shapes identity. It's not just that you suppress emotion. You distrust it. You feel embarrassed by it. You question whether your reactions are valid. Over time, self-doubt replaces self. In adulthood, this manifests as a subtle alienation. You make decisions that look logical, but afterward you feel unsettled. You achieve goals, but satisfaction is muted. You enter relationships, but something remains distant. People may describe you as self-aware, yet internally you feel unclear. It's not that you lack insight, it's that your nervous system learned early to separate insight from embodiment. Many people who feel disconnected from themselves are highly functional. They work, they socialize, they maintain routines, but when asked what they actually want, they hesitate, not because they are indecisive, but because the signal is faint. The part of the brain that tracks desire was deprioritized in favor of safety. Desire can destabilize attachment. Wanting more, needing differently, setting boundaries of these actions carry risk in unpredictable environments. So the brain learns to mute them. This creates what developmental psychology has sometimes described as uneven growth. Certain capacities develop earlier: responsibility, analytical thinking, emotional awareness of others, while others remain underdeveloped. Self-soothing that isn't self-silencing, spontaneous joy, assertive need. You might be excellent at understanding other people's emotions while remaining unclear about your own. That is not a personality quirk. It is training. Another layer of disconnection appears in the body itself. Chronic stress, what some researchers have called allostatic load, accumulates quietly. The nervous system remains on call. Muscles stay slightly tense, breath remains shallow, sleep is light. Over time, the body's signals hunger, fatigue, tension become normalized. You don't feel disconnected from your body because it stopped communicating. You feel disconnected because you stopped listening. Listening once came with consequences. If you were tired but needed to perform, exhaustion had to be overridden. If you were hurt but no one could help, pain had to be tolerated silently. If you were scared but expected to be strong, fear had to be hidden. The brain learned that internal signals are negotiable. In adulthood, this looks like pushing through burnout, ignoring discomfort in relationships, staying in roles that feel wrong because leaving feels destabilizing. You may describe yourself as out of touch, but what you are really describing is long-term override. There is also grief here, though it often remains unnamed. Disconnection from yourself means losing access to spontaneity. It means experiencing life slightly removed. It means observing your own reactions with suspicion rather than trust. But the mind prefers coherence. So instead of acknowledging the cost of adaptation, it tells a different story. You're just independent. You're just practical. You're not overly emotional. These narratives preserve dignity. They avoid the harder truth. Something essential was sidelined to maintain safety. Guarded empathy is another common feature. You might feel deeply for others. You might sense shifts in mood instantly. Trauma research has long observed how children in unpredictable environments become experts in reading subtle cues. But that same attunement rarely extends inward. It's easier to track external signals than internal ones. External tracking once kept you safe. Internal tracking required someone else to respond, and that wasn't guaranteed. Disconnection also shows up in rest. When the environment is finally calm, when there's no immediate task to manage, a strange discomfort appears. Stillness feels unfamiliar. The absence of crisis creates unease. The body, shaped by years of readiness, struggles to downshift. You may interpret this as boredom or restlessness, but often it is vigilance without an object. The nervous system has not yet learned that quiet can be safe. People sometimes assume that reconnecting with yourself is a matter of mindfulness or reflection. But if disconnection was formed through necessity, it cannot be reversed through simple intention. The body does not relinquish protective patterns easily. It holds on to them long after the environment is changed. This is why adulthood can feel confusing. You may be surrounded by stability, yet internally feel fragmented. You may have supportive relationships, yet still hesitates to rely on them. You may intellectually understand that your needs matter, yet emotionally feel uncomfortable expressing them. The adaptation outlived the danger. None of this makes you damaged. It makes you trained. Your nervous system optimized for survival under the conditions it faced. It learned to suppress what threatened attachment. It learned to monitor instead of express. It learned to endure instead of ask. But endurance comes at a cost. The cost is intimacy with yourself. When you are disconnected, decisions feel strategic rather than intuitive. Emotions feel distant rather than embodied. Joy feels muted. Anger feels abstract. Sadness feels contained. You might function well. You might even succeed. But there is a quiet sense of absence, as though you are living beside yourself rather than within yourself. The unsettling truth is that this disconnection was once intelligent. It preserved relationships that felt essential. It reduced conflict. It maintained stability in environments that lacked it. The brain chose survival over softness because survival was urgent. What remains now is not dysfunction, it is inertia. Patterns formed early persist because they were reinforced repeatedly. Each time suppression prevented conflict, it strengthened. Each time independence avoided disappointment, it solidified. Each time vigilance anticipated disruption, it proved itself useful. The nervous system is loyal to what worked. Reconnection, then, is not about becoming more emotional or less controlled. It is about recognizing that the conditions which required disconnection may no longer exist. It is about updating a system that still operates on old information. This is not dramatic, it is slow. It involves noticing subtle signals without immediately overriding them. It involves tolerating the discomfort of expressing a need. It involves allowing rest without preparing for impact. For someone who learned early that safety was conditional, this feels risky. Vulnerability once carried consequences. Expression once created instability. Silence once preserved connection. But the body does not automatically distinguish between past and present. It needs evidence. The real reason you feel disconnected from yourself is not weakness. It is not lack of depth. It is not a flawed personality. It is a nervous system shaped by environments where self-expression was not consistently safe. You adapted. You survived. You became composed, capable, controlled, and in the process, you turned the volume down on yourself. Healing, if the word applies, is not about becoming someone new. It is about allowing the signals that were muted to re-emerge without punishing them. It is about discovering that the internal world you sidelined was never wrong, just unprotected. Rest, care, and safety do not require performance anymore. They do not need to be earned by silence or strength. Learning that can feel disorienting. It can feel undeserved, but it is not indulgence. It is recalibration. You were not born disconnected. You learned it. And what was learned under pressure can, slowly, be unlearned when pressure is gone.